Hello and welcome to Maximum Disc, a show where I celebrate physical media and talk about films that I own on Blu Ray and 4K Blu Ray. I'm James Adamson, I'm a co-host on the Double Reel Film Podcast. If you like this chat about physical media, please do check out Double Reel. It's a magazine-style podcast made by people who love films as much as you do. We talk about various topics and movies and think that if you tune into any episode, you'll come away with some great ideas for things to watch instead of just doing what the algorithm tells you. That's enough sales pitch for the podcast. Today we're talking about physical media. Why does it matter? In short, if you care about a film, you need to own it because the streamers might not make it available or not make it available in the proper version, the director's cut or whatever that makes the film work properly. And in particular, it's not going to look and sound its best on a compressed internet file compared to on a proper disc format that you can watch at home. So hopefully you're on board with that already. That's why you've tuned into this episode. On each one of these on Maximum Disc, I'll talk about one film that I own. Obviously, what people really want to know is what it looks and sounds like. Is it a good transfer, a good representation of the original film that you saw and fell in love with on the big screen? I talk about that, not in the most technical detail, but I try and give you a good picture of that, pun intended. I also talk about my relationship to the film, why I came to, care about it enough to buy it and all of those things. And at the end, it's a kind of little roundup. I try and give an idea of what whether I think it's an essential purchase and help you make your own mind up whether to buy it. So today we're talking about You Were Never Really Here on Blu Ray. Now that's a film from 2017, written and directed by Scottish filmmaker Lynne Ramsay, based on a novella by a guy called Jonathan Ames. Nerdy screenwriting fact, the source book is just 96 pages long, which is arguably the ideal length of source material to adapt to a film. It's very, very similar in sort of size and scale. Lynne Ramsay, perhaps most famous for We Need to Talk About Kevin, a film about the agonies of a parent whose child turned out to be a school shooter. She's got a very short filmography, not prolific at all. Her debut was Ratcatcher in 1999, followed by Morven Callar in 2002, but she's only directed 2 films in the next 20 years. We Need to Talk About Kevin and this, You Were Never Really Here. As of late 2025, she finally has another film coming out. Can't wait to see how that turns out. Other than that, she's sometimes more famous for the films she didn't end up directing, like Jane Got Her Gun and The Lovely Bones. Seen as a bit of a perfectionist, really wants to make her films a certain way, the way that matters to her, and should rather not make the film at all if she can't make it her way, which makes the films that she does make kind of special to watch. Joaquin Phoenix plays the main character, Joe, on whose shoulders the film mostly rests. Apart from that, you've got Alessandro Nivola in a small role, and then the cast, apart from those two as actors, not too well known to me, although I recognise some of them from cameos they've had in other films, people like Judith Roberts, Ekaterina Samsonov, Alex Nanette, John Doman. Cinematography is by Thomas Townend, who's sometimes credited as Tom Townend. The best known work of his to me anyway is Attack the Block and this, You Were Never Really Here. Now, given how great his work is on those 2 films that I know about, I'm slightly surprised he hasn't done more. He hasn't done a huge number of films, but he does make a significant contribution to this film. The sound, as always, has a significant number of people working on it, but the 3 people who appear from my reading and from looking at awards nominations and so on, who were the most sort of crucial supervising contributors, were Paul Davies, Anna Burtmark and Joe Jackson. The score, sometimes the star of the film, is by the now legendary Jonny Greenwood, once most famous for being a member of Radiohead, but surely more famous these days for the music he composes for films. Regularly does stuff for PTA as well as other people. His score is very important to the film and dovetails very closely with the specific sound design created by the sound team. So it's really all one thing once you start watching the film and, listening to it. In terms of awards and nominations, this is quite a small film, but it did get some attention. It was nominated for a number of things at Cannes, including the Palme d'Or for Best Film. It didn't win that, but it did win Best Screenplay for Lynne Ramsay and Best Actor for Joaquin Phoenix. Otherwise, quite a few awards and nominations from the various independent awards and the Critics Societies, especially for River Phoenix, his acting, and Jonny Greenwood's score. So a quick summary of what the film's about. In terms of plotting, this film is in some ways a spiritual successor to Taxi Driver because the main character is a war veteran struggling with his mental health. And I think it's an interesting indication of how that character was portrayed in the 1970s by Paul Schrader compared to how he's portrayed in the 2010s by Lynne Ramsay, although there's more to it than that. Joe is a former soldier and FBI agent, suffering severely from PTSD from his childhood, where he suffered physical abuse from his father, and from the death and suffering he witnessed in his 2 government jobs. Now he works as a kind of mercenary or hired gun, specialising in rescuing women and girls who've been trafficked. As the film starts, he just finishes off his last rescue, and then he's hired to rescue a senator's daughter, Nina. This girl, Nina, she's a child. She's been abducted by sex traffickers. We see him investigate the case to its complicated and dark centre. There's always more to it than you at first glance in these films. You see his lethal fighting and killing skills from his military training, but also, most crucially to how this film works, we also see that the biggest threat to Joe is not the bad guys he's hunting down, however dangerous they are, and the web of conspiracy around them. It's actually his own incredibly damaged mental state and suicidal thoughts. You're not sure if the biggest threat to his life is going to come from himself as opposed to the people that are ganging up on him. That sort of leads to its conclusion, but as you say, the story is whether he's going to rescue Nina, but also whether he's going to survive the ordeal himself. My original experience with the film, my background with it, why did I want to own it? What did this film mean to me? Well, I was aware of Lynne Ramsay, but I hadn't seen any of her other films. I was quite nervous if we need to talk about Kevin. It felt like a very distressing subject to watch. I've since watched it. It's a great film, but it is very distressing. I heard what this film was about, and I realised it was going to be right up my street. The storyline that I just described, above, I'm definitely going to like it. Definitely like the idea of that, what could have been a relatively standard thriller story, being filmed in a very different way, telling that story in a different way from the point of view of a really damaged person and how he's struggling with his own problems. Got rave reviews from people like Mark Kermode. Joaquin Phoenix, I generally think is an amazing actor, possibly the best of his generation. Watch any of his films and you generally find that he's quietly or otherwise the best thing in them. So I made a point of seeing this film at the cinema. And was completely blown away. I think it was one of the best films of 2017, one of my favourite films of recent years. Absolutely loved it. It did everything I hoped it was going to do. I think it succeeded on all of the things that it laid out as its intentions as a movie. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. This incredible portrayal of a grim and terrifying case. His battles with the sex traffickers and the conspirators around that sex trafficking, but also his own, mental struggles. I thought it was filmed in such an original and unusual way. I thought it was great to see that story told in a different way. And while some people might find its style a bit obscure, maybe, I thought it suited the film perfectly and absolutely loved it. I would watch the more straight-ahead thriller version of this story, but I also absolutely loved this more singular Lynne Ramsay way of telling the story. Honestly, it's a complete success as far as I'm concerned. So I bought the Blu Ray of it as the first opportunity. When you love a film that much, you want to own it. So I bought the Blu Ray. I'm not aware at the moment of there being a 4K Blu Ray of this available. Certainly not at the time. There is talk of one being available now, but we'll come back to that later. I thought it was interesting when I was lining this up to do for Maximum Disc. I realised it's easily the lowest budget film I've reviewed on Maximum Disc so far. I mean, even allowing for inflation. So I thought it would be interesting to see what a more independent film that hadn't had loads of money to spend on cameras and lighting and sets and everything, production design, how would that shape up, on the usual comparison of look and sound and everything else. So then we talk about what kind of disc, what kind of package do you get in your hand when you buy this? This is a very standard Blu-ray. Came out in 2018, somewhat less than a year, I think, after the film itself came out. It's got very limited extras. It's a single disc with the film on Blu-ray and a 1 minute featurette, literally 1 minute long featurette about the adaptation of the book to the screen, which doesn't tell you very much. I mean, how could it? Basically, the disc is as stripped down as the film itself. The film comes right down to the bare essentials, and so does the Blu-ray. I've said before in a couple of episodes, it's not essential for me in all cases to have all the extras and a booklet and everything else. I've got some amazing Criterion discs which I love and all the extras that you get, but sometimes it's just about the movie, and that this disc is just about the movie, and that's okay with me. I have one small complaint, that the cover art is kind of an abstract picture blending a bloody arm with imagery of Joaquin Phoenix in the middle of the story. I don't think it's as good as the poster that came out when the film was released. I would have preferred a Blu-ray disc that looked like the original poster, but again, if it's just about the film, it doesn't matter so much what the case says, but I thought I'd mention it. So partly what I'm going to be talking about now is that there is a 4K disc floating around. Its availability and provenance I'll talk about a bit later, but because this is a smaller independent film, and because the Blu-ray is easier to get than the 4K, I'm basically saying, is the Blu-ray enough, or should I be holding out for more? So that's what I was thinking about when I started kind of making notes, watch the film again, put it up on the screen and see what I thought of everything. Now to the video. How does this look? Firstly, a brief technical note. It was shot on digital with Arri Alexa cameras, quite a popular camera for digital. They used Panavision lenses on top of that, and from my reading, it looks like they've done some work on the image to make that digital image look filmic and give the impression of slight grain. If you read around, listen to podcasts, read up about films, you will notice there's a discussion of like film versus digital. The likes of Tarantino and Christopher Nolan are very hardline about everything's got to be on film. Not everyone thinks that way. Some people are happy to embrace the technology. I think there's arguments in both directions. One thing I think is very interesting, David Cronenberg said this on an interview, is that, and David Cronenberg's another one like Lynne Ramsay, who doesn't always have unlimited resources at her disposal to make her film. So it's about what you can do with the digital technology. And David Cronenberg's been to some demonstrations that show that if you treat a digital image in the right way, it looks just as much like a film as celluloid does. But not everyone's going to agree with that statement. But certainly for a budget of $2.5 million on an independent film, where Lynne Ramsay had to give up part of her salary to get one of the songs that they needed to make the film work, it's going to be about making the best use of digital, which allows for longer takes and all of those things. So that's why they went with digital. Having said all that, it's a really well shot film. The night scenes in particular are a highlight, and that's a common thing with digital films. You look at something like Collateral, which is, Michael Mann starting to get really into digital filmmaking. You look at Nightcrawler, which shot its film scenes, its night scenes on digital and its day scenes on film. You do get to see all of that, and it does make a difference. This is a really good transfer. And what you get is some real highlights. Talked about nighttime. You also get some lovely impressionistic scenes. There's a lot of light streaming across trees and lakes through windows. There's a recurring scene on an overpass. Sometimes the light is harsh because you think Joaquin Phoenix is struggling and he walks out into a bright light and he feels like he should be cocooned somewhere. You frequently see him like locking himself in a cupboard for various reasons, and when he's out in the light, he doesn't like it. And this film makes really good use of light to tell the story in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes the light comes across really beautifully. Sometimes the light is used to tell a different aspect of Joaquin Phoenix's state of mind. Considering they don't have huge sets, huge budgets and everything else, and a lot of the settings are quite grimy, gritty. It doesn't necessarily look pretty, but it always looks incredibly compelling. And Lynne Ramsay's craftsmanship and her work with Tom Townend really shines through. That, if you've got a decent digital image and a lot of skill and craftsmanship, you can make a terrific film. There is an excellent image to work with, even though it didn't have a lavish budget, like I say. And because it's digital, it transfers very nicely to Blu-ray. Ironically, the biggest action set piece in the film, although there are a number of sort of high points or sudden sharp shocks of action, the one sustained action sequence around that is actually seen as much on CCTV cameras and out of shot as it is in the actual scene with the actors in. And that may have been budgetary. We talked about You Were Never Really Here on the podcast as one of our hidden gems of film we want to tell people about, and we discussed why that scene was shot the way it was. It could just be a purely stylistic choice. It could be that the time and money available wasn't enough to make that film look exciting. It could be that it wasn't something that they wanted to glorify. I do, however, think it's really striking and beautifully done that the CCTV cameras see a body thrown through a doorway, and you know that Joaquin Phoenix is in there kind of ripping things up. Now, you don't need that much resolution for that. You don't need a 4K transfer to see that. That's always going to look a bit grainy. But it works brilliantly in the film. It's well shot. It's well composed. Lynne Ramsay knows where to put the camera. And there's lots of other visual quality to be impressed by elsewhere, especially the bits when he's lying in the park or in water. And that looks amazing. And the way the light is used then is really great. And all of those things are really well captured in the digital transfer that you get for this disc. I tried to find out, and I think a few other people have done as well, and it hasn't been easy to find out how big a resolution they had on their footage. That's not the most technical way that's ever been put. But there is this fear that especially in the early to mid 2010s, the digital footage you get from films wasn't like full native 4K, and that if they come to do a big restoration, it wouldn't actually be 2K, it wouldn't actually be 4K, it would only be 2K, and that would require an upscale to do a 4K Blu-ray. So this might be as good as an image as it gets. The 4K Blu-ray might be, only marginal compared to this, but I think the image is very good indeed, especially for a low-budget film. And this disc has paid the appropriate care and attention to make sure that that transfer is a good representation. I think it was good thinking on the part of Lynne Ramsay and Tom Townend as well. The way they choose to shoot the film made it fairly easy to preserve that image onto a good Blu-ray. So, I think you've got some people making this film who planned well right from the beginning to make sure that even with the limited budget, they were going to make this film really make a good impression, which is preserved on this disc. In terms of the sound, it's a DTS Master 5.1 mix, and it's actually very important that you get the sound right. I think the sound and the score are probably the stars of the film more than the video, even though the video is very good. We've done stuff on Maximum Disc where it's more about the vision than the sound, but here I do think the sound design is the most important thing. The sound design is very disorienting and weird and stressful and unnerving, and that's on purpose. The film opens with like whispers, dialogue overlapping with background noise. That kind of dialogue and background noise mixture happens a lot in the film. When he's out and about, you get the roar of traffic, kind of hits you quite hard. The editing is very good as well to go from silent to loud very quickly. It cuts between scenes quite randomly, although it's not random. What happens is that he's out on the street and he sees something, and that sparks off a really traumatic memory of something he saw when he was an FBI agent. A bunch of girls just asking him to take a photo reminds him of, they look like girls that he found dead when he was working as an FBI agent, or like dead bodies he saw when he was in the military. And that sudden shift from one sound to another, that real roaring sound that's almost too much to take, that's really important, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to put you firmly in Joaquin Phoenix's shoes, and it's just trying to represent what it's like to be someone who is so traumatized that a sound, an environment that you're not comfortable in, can really be overwhelming. And that overwhelming sound is important to capture, and this 5.1 mix is a really, really good representation of that. I remember it being really powerful in the cinema, and obviously I've got a decent setup, but it's not the same as a really good kind of London cinema that's doing a good job with its sound. Not every cinema is as good as that, but the one I did was really good. But at home, with a good system, you really get that sound. The dialogue is clear, and at the same time, you get these specific sounds coming in underneath this overwhelming kind of sense that things are getting too much for Joaquin Phoenix. So every aspect of this film is telling Lynne Ramsay's story. She's put a lot of attention to each of these things, and it's good that the sound mix they've given for the disc brings that across really well. It really is very good. As well as that, the score by Jonny Greenwood is extraordinary. Now, his scores are always extraordinary. Things like The Master and There Will Be Blood are incredible. This is the usual sort of array of skillful, creative and stunning sort of use of music and sound by Greenwood for the score that you'd always expect. It's up to par with his more famous film scores, if you ask me. it's a mixture of like song needle drops thrown in at just the right time, music that's been played on the radio. That's apparently called diegetic music, music that you can hear in the film. There are actual melodies he's written for the score, which you can hear, but also his usual range of disorienting and disturbing sounds thrown in just to heighten Joe's feelings. Like I say, it really works hand in hand with the sound mix. So the sound designers have done one thing, and Johnny Greenwood's score is integrated beautifully with that. Whoever's responsible of that, and I'm sure it's them all working together, it really comes out beautifully because it heightens Joe's feelings. The suspense and the nightmarish atmosphere of the film itself is really well captured with this. What it also does is that music is a really good tool to express what's going on here, because there are times when Joaquin Phoenix's Joe almost absent-mindedly beats somebody up or fights a life or death struggle, and you following him in the story, you see that, and you're compelled by that, and it is suspenseful. But you're almost spending as much time as he is thinking about the struggles that he has, his feelings for his mother and his past life, and all of those things that are creeping up on him. And to keep those two things balanced at the same time requires a lot of great storytelling, which the sound does as well as the acting. It's really beautifully done. This is a low budget film. It doesn't have a great deal of sort of fireworks and big sounds, and it's not the heist scene in Heat with helicopters and gunshots in every angle. It's not the Charlie Don't Surf napalm scene in Apocalypse Now, but it does make full use of the DCS sound mix. And even with an amazing performance by Joaquin Phoenix, which I think is his career best, I do think that the combined work of the sound and Greenwood's score is actually the star of this movie. So very impressive sound. Again, these people did not have the kind of money to work with. I mean, the budget they have would do you about half a day of filming on a Marvel blockbuster. So what they've done here is really especially impressive. Overall, I absolutely adore this film. I can't say enough about it. I'm one of the people who sings the praises of this film. I'm fully aware that people will listen to this, maybe watch it and think, what's this guy talking about? It's rubbish. It might be a matter of taste. I think this is an incredibly well-made film. Don't go in expecting an all-out action film. It's a very different take on that, but I think it works, and I think it's very compelling and gripping in new and interesting ways. And for an indie film like this, it's brilliantly done. I was talking at the beginning about how it's almost like the spiritual successor of Taxi Driver, because at the start of the film you see him, there's bits that look a bit sinister, like him walking into a DIY store and buying a hammer, and clearly to use it as a weapon, because he doesn't have a lot of guns and everything. He's a very DIY operation, again, pun intended. And there are times when he's like putting things in a plastic bag sitting in a motel room, and until you know exactly what's going on, this could be a really sinister person. But then you find out that what he's doing is he's rescuing girls who need to be rescued. All right, he's being paid to do it, but he doesn't look like he's not driving a Porsche or anything. So he's not, he's at least partly doing it, I think, because he believes in what he's doing. And then you realise how he's struggling with his mental health. And that, the compassion with which his story is told, I think is very different to the 70s. Now, in fairness to Paul Schrader, when he was writing Travis Bickle and Taxi Driver, he was trying to say, I needed to write that guy because I was afraid I was going to turn into that guy. And it was almost like exorcising a demon in his case. But it did, attract some criticism with hindsight, let's say, that it's once again saying that a traumatized war veteran is only seen in the context of being a threat to other people. This is seeing a traumatized war veteran who's trying to do good things. He's trying to be the best person he can be, but he's really struggling, and he's actually a threat to himself. This guy's genuinely, fighting against suicidal, tendencies while he's trying to help this girl, and the girl herself, Nina, has some interesting parts to play. So you've really got some good stuff going on in this film, and it's made with genuine craftsmanship to make it a really, excellent piece of work. One of the best bits of cinema, I think, of the whole 2010s. So is it an essential purchase? I mean, having said all that, absolutely. A physical media version of this is essential, because indie films aren't always easy to get hold of on a streaming service. Maybe it'll be on Netflix, not forever. Maybe it'll on Amazon Prime, not forever. Digital copies, all the stuff I said, you don't even fully own it, as the lawsuit with Amazon indicates. So there's every reason to buy this on a physical copy. The only sort of caveats to that would be some people would see this as too indie an art house, so maybe you need to kind of rent it or watch it to check that you like the film, because if you go in expecting all that action thriller, you might be disappointed. There is action. There's some tough violence and gore and lots of suspense and jeopardy, but it's very slow-paced and focuses as much on Joe's internal struggles as his external battles. But I think it justifies that concentration. It's really something you should have on your shelf, and this disc is really good. The other caveat is, of course, that there is a 4K. Currently, it's very hard to get and it's expensive. It's an Australian import. I'm not sure if that 2K upscale into 4K justifies me upgrading to the 4K Blu-ray. For you personally buying this, the standard Blu-ray at the moment is about £8 to buy wherever you might buy it. And I would need convincing that the 4K with 30 odd quid plus however much it costs to get it posted from fucking Australia is worth all that extra money. But it is probably on a long list of things that I will eventually want to upgrade to 4K one day. So with that caveat, a physical copy of this, absolutely. I think it's a no-brainer to buy an £8 Blu-ray that looks and sounds as good as this. If you really do want the 4K, it is out there, but it's going to cost you more. So that's your call. All right, so that was You Were Never Really Here. This film means a lot to me, so thank you for being here while I go on and on about it. I hope this was useful. I hope it was entertaining. If you do like this chat, I'll say once again, please do check out the Double Reel Film Podcast, and ways to find us on our socials and a link to the podcast will be up on the screen in a few moments. I hope to see you next time anyway for more physical media chat right here on Maximum Disc. The Maximum Disc YouTube channel is brought to you by Double Reel, the monthly magazine podcast for the discerning film nerd. If you like our celebration of physical media, please check out the podcast for more chat about the films we love and hate.